Good morning and welcome to Rising Fridays. Emily, apparently it's been a year since we've been doing this?
Yeah.
Versions of this?
Versions of this, right. I found a picture in my camera roll that I thought it would be fun to look back on. A particularly fun memory from, I think, the first week we started doing this last summer. Ryan decided to go to CVS and purchase props.
That's right.
The markers are still in the green room.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that actually worked or not, if people could read the numbers. But yeah, this was making the point that there is enough progressives in West Virginia, of all places,
right,
that could destroy Manchin if they organized around that possibility, and that they could use their leverage in order to kind of push him.
Right.
Well, and actually, we'll see. We'll see. I think Manchin's probably headed. I think he's got his eyes on the White House.
Yeah.
So I don't think that he's necessarily looking at re-election in 2024. But in order to do that, he's got to do some version of Build Back Better. So maybe it will all pan out for a little 1/3 kind of Build Back Better light that we'll see.
It was just a good reminder that, frankly, we do not use enough props.
We don't. We need more props, for sure.
We need more props. We'll work on that.
This stuff.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah.
I like the
one
yellow
time,
paper better,
I think
actually.
I accidentally threw a pen at you. Maybe I could keep doing that.
I only throw them on purpose.
Right.
But anyway.
We don't throw enough things either. We're working on it. But actually, speaking of Joe Manchin and what Democrats think is politically expedient for them, President Biden is reportedly making plans to meet with Mohammed bin Salman later this month in Saudi Arabia. But this all goes together in this broader economic conversation about inflation, about the jobs numbers that are out right now. This is breaking. You have the jobs numbers that, if we look at it, we have it, speaking of props, we have it right in front of us. The unemployment rate is at 3.6%. It's, the jobs number is probably good for the Biden administration, I would say right now.
Sure, and the economy added 390,000 new jobs in May, which beats expectations.
Right.
So now these could be revised. No, these will be revised in future months, and it's been very difficult with the pandemic to get this right. And there's been some systemic problems that whereas in the past, when they've gotten it wrong, they've kind of gotten it wrong across the board.
Right.
Which is okay, because then you can still know the direction of the economy. Because of the pandemic, businesses that are hit harder by it are having a harder time reporting. Mm-hmm. In other words, like a lot of retail shops that were having the staffing problems that we've heard about, then also are having a hard time just delivering all of their numbers to the government, or they're like putting it behind, they're putting that as one of the last things, and the government was having a hard time analyzing that. And so it turned out that there were a lot more jobs throughout 2021, the summer in particular, that were created than were actually reported. And so interestingly, in this report, you see hospitality and leisure,
yes, that was
massively
the big
expanding.
one.
You see manufacturing going up, and you see business-related jobs also expanding, but you see retail declining. Mm-hmm. I'm curious for your take on this. There could be a couple of different things going on. One, this could be a rebalancing of the economy despite the fact that there are hundreds of people dying a day, as the economy opens up and we move on from COVID. You are going to see a move from retail and buying crap online mm-hmm. to going out and spending time with friends and going to coffee shops and bars and restaurants. And so you're going to see an increase in hospitality and leisure, as they call it, which could then correspond with a decline in retail, because you're spending less time doing that, which could actually help inflation too, because people were buying so much crap,
yeah,
that even if there had not been a pandemic, because of the way that our ports and our infrastructure is set up, mm-hmm. you're going to have supply chain bottlenecks. The supply chain bottlenecks lead to increased prices. If you have less demand on the products coming into the ports, then you're going to have less of a supply chain crisis and less pressure on retail. Now, you're still going to have pressure. Then the price pressure then moves over to the hospitality part.
And this is what's the redistribution in the economy is, I think, where you're still seeing so much uncertainty, because it's not just numbers. It's all of these like shifts that happen in human behavior and the behavior of Americans. And one thing that did stand out to me is that you do still have the number of persons who are not in the labor force who currently want a job not changing, so it's at 5.7 million, and that's above the February 2020 level of 5 million. So there's still a chunk of the population who wants to work, who hasn't gotten that. And that's another question about the distribution of these jobs in terms of earning potential. And so all of these shifts are happening. I think you're right to say that hospitality and leisure may be increasing at the cost of retail. And I think a lot of people in retail sort of knew that there was bloat. That was some people, not everybody, prepared to sort of it would be going down. I'm curious for your take, the broader economic picture from inflation to the jobs numbers to the future to gas prices. Jamie Dimon had some interesting comments that I want to play and get your reaction to, Ryan. He said to brace yourselves for, quote, an economic hurricane. Do you think this is also where Biden, who talked a really tough game about Saudi Arabia, MBS, is going to talk to him about gas prices, about all of those? Do you think because there's this anticipation, Janet Yellen had a little bit of a mea culpa this week about getting inflation wrong. I'm not sure how rosy the expectations are for the rest of Biden's presidency. Do you think that's why he's going to Saudi Arabia?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. They should have actually factored MBS into their inflation forecast because if Trump was still president and he has this leverage over MBS and MBS has this leverage over him, which is both financial and political and gross, but it was symbiotic. And when Trump would ask MBS to change OPEC's output either up or down, he asked both at different times, MBS complied.
Right.
Like the traditional kind of empire-client relationship. There has been a partisan realignment around the relationship with Saudi Arabia, like you said, and it's not just the war in Yemen, which Obama originally supported, Democrats then turned on. It's not just Saudi Arabia teaming up with Israel to try to undermine the Iran deal. It's also the butchering with the bone saw of Jamal Khashoggi, which put a spotlight on human rights abuses that just went so far beyond the pale that people were like, okay, we like to look away from this because of the money and the weapons exchanges, but this is too much to look away from. And so Biden in the campaign called MBS a pariah. Yeah. Said, I'm not going to meet with him. And he didn't meet with him up until, he still has not met with him. He has insisted on doing calls or meetings with the king instead of the crown prince, who's the de facto ruler. And so MBS is like, okay, fine. How do you like $4 or $5 for a gallon of gas? And it raised the question of what has been the point of this relationship for the U.S. for the last 70 years. Especially as when Russia invaded Ukraine, the entire kind of rationale for the apologia and the relationship with these Middle East tyrants has been, well, at least we'll get the oil when we need it in a pinch. And MBS is like, no, you're not getting the oil when you need it in a pinch. And so the answer from Biden seems to be, all right, uncle, I give up. Just pump more gas. And so he's now pumping more gas that will lower gas prices. And gas prices don't just act as a proxy for inflation across the rest of the economy.
Right.
Everything requires energy. And so it raises the price of everything. So you could be seeing the beginning of a tapering off.
Yeah, desperate times. And as Ryan just mentioned, Biden's Saudi trip comes as the OPEC oil cartel and allied producing countries, including Russia, are planning to raise production by 648,000 barrels per day in July and August in efforts to offer relief from soaring global energy prices amid inflation. Biden's expected meeting with Saudi King MBS is a stark shift in Biden's previous statements that he would treat the kingdom, as Ryan just mentioned, as a pariah of the state after the 28 killing of Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post columnist and outspoken critic of the Saudi government. So this actually really all is tied in together. And Dimon's comments on the hurricane are super interesting to me because I don't think that's typical, characteristic of what a lot of people are seeing when they look ahead. Although Biden is freaked out, it's an election year, midterm cycle that's looking really bad for Democrats, which explains why he would, so quickly reverse course on the Saudi question. But what did you think about Jamie Dimon's comments?
Yeah, and part of his point, he says that there's enough kind of spending from the American Rescue Plan still in state coffers and the pockets of the American people that will
retail.
Last, he said 6 to 9 months. Yeah,
exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
And so, but that's not the only thing. If you look out at the world, it doesn't look pretty.
Yep.
I mean, and we're going to talk later on the show about Pakistan. Not only is it facing all sorts of political unrest, relatedly, it's like 120 degrees there and in India. Reports of like birds dropping out of the sky because it's too hot. You have Ukrainian farmers like unable to plant because their harvest still hasn't from last year been shipped out. You have besides that war, you have climate catastrophes going on all over the world, which influences not just the kind of economy broadly, but food and fuel production. And so you have Sri Lanka recently defaulted on its debt, which these are the kinds of things. Well, who are their counterparties? Who did they owe money to? And then when those people then can't pay their debts, how does that kind of cascade downward throughout the economy? So I kind of, I'm pessimistic by nature, but Dimon's characterization of a coming economic hurricane seems right to me. It's like if we immediately got some peace between Russia and Ukraine, that's the one thing I could see producing some sort of economic juice in the economy. But otherwise, it just looks like one catastrophe after another.
Do you think he's lost confidence in the Fed?
Well, I think a lot of people are at a place where moving these, moving M1 and moving interest rates can only do so much. Like the Fed can't do anything about Ukraine. The Fed can't lower temperatures in India and Pakistan. The Fed can't really do anything
I hope
about the courts. I mean, I wish they could. I mean, somebody's got to. 120 degrees is not sustainable.
The Nest thermometer for the world is actually inside the Fed.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. So
there's a lot of unsettled dynamics geopolitically, and part of that is pandemic, but part of it was brewing before the pandemic, and it feels like right now there's so many sort of balls up in the air, and we don't know where they're going to land, and I think that's a good cause for pessimism.
Yes. It's cause for pessimism.
Good cause
that's right.
for pessimism. All right, well, we will have more Rising for you right after this.